One of the two of the most common arguments I hear against the Prophet Muhammad or against Muhammad is that the Prophet Muhammad invented the Quran for his own self-serving motives, and that Muhammad plagiarized Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources or stories. Now, do these two arguments hold up against the Prophet Muhammad? And they really don't when you really look at them. All right, so let's go to the first statement, that Prophet Muhammad invented Islam for some self-serving motive, and I think that's a fallacious argument. It's called the fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem. So what is the fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem? The fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem is kind of like saying this salesman has a motive to sell me this car, so that means I cannot trust him. So it's a fallacious argument. Just because a personal benefit came to the Prophet Muhammad out of something, that doesn't mean you render him unreliable. Getting to logic and reasoning, logic and reasoning, there's a concept in logic and reasoning called fallacies, and this is a fallacy. This is a fallacious argument. It's called the fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem. So basically, if the Prophet Muhammad was really inventing the Quran, or if the Prophet Muhammad really made up the Quran for self-serving motives, why would he author a book, for example, that tells him to pray the night prayers upon himself, in exclusion to the rest of the Muslims? We read in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 79, and during a part of the night pray tahajjud beyond what is incumbent on you. Maybe your Lord will raise you to a position of great glory. So basically, the Quran, chapter 17, verse 79, according to Tafsir Ibn Abbas, that means, which is the commentary of Ibn Abbas, and Ibn Abbas was a important disciple or cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. Ibn Abbas said that this verse is only referring to the Prophet Muhammad, so only the Prophet Muhammad has to pray the tahajjud prayers. So if Prophet Muhammad was really making up the Quran, why would he author a verse that makes him pray the night prayers? Why couldn't he just say, "I'm the Prophet of God, I'm too busy to pray the night prayers," or something like that? And another verse that critics that I think shows that the Prophet Muhammad didn't invent the Quran for his own self-serving motives would be the Quran, chapter 80. And let me just get to that real quick. Basically, the Quran, chapter 80, the first 10 verses were revealed in connection to a man named Abdullah ibn Makram, who was a blind man who went to the Prophet Muhammad seeking guidance, seeking Islam. And the Prophet Muhammad frowned and turned away from him, and turned to the other people, according to Tafsir Ibn Kathir and Tafsir al-Qurtubi. So basically, so these verses, the Quran, chapter 80, verses 1 to 10, were revealed as a rebuke to the Prophet Muhammad for preaching to those who had no interest in God's message, while turning away from those who sought guidance. So the Prophet Muhammad was really inventing the Quran for his own self-serving motive. Why would he author the Quran, chapter 80, verses 1 to 10, which rebuke him for turning away a blind man? It would have been easier if the Prophet Muhammad was really inventing the Quran and Islam. It would have been better, or it would have been easier for him to just avoid authoring these verses that rebuke him. So it doesn't make sense that the Prophet Muhammad would invent a book that rebukes him. Why couldn't he just not have verses rebuking him and just always praising him? So regardless, that the first statement that the Prophet Muhammad, that the Quran was invented by Muhammad for his own self-serving purposes is the fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem. And there are many verses that aren't in the Prophet Muhammad's favor. So if the Prophet Muhammad was really inventing the Quran, why did he alter those verses which weren't in his favor? Makes absolutely no sense. As for the Quran, as for these Jewish and Christian apocryphal stories that are found in the Quran, which are found in pre-Islamic Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources, like Jesus making the clay birds and speaking while an infant, which is found in the infancy Gospel of Thomas, etc., etc. And are these stories fiction that fictional stories that somehow made it into the Quran? Well, again, that's also a fallacious argument. Just because we can find stories of Old Testament and New Testament figures in the Jewish and apocryphal sources and also in the Quran, that doesn't mean that these stories about these Old Testament and New Testament figures is false, because that's called the genetic fallacy. It's a fallacious argument called the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is like saying, my second grade teacher was evil. She said 2 + 2 = 4. Thus, the statement 2 + 2 = 4 is false because it came from my evil teacher. So it's a fallacious argument. It's attacking the source of the argument instead of the argument itself. Regardless, as I said in my previous videos, that the New Testament itself has that same exact problem. In the introduction to the New Testament by Raymond Brown, and Raymond Brown is a Christian scholar, pages 740. Page 740. Page 754. The Epistle of Jude quotes the apocryphal book Assumption of Moses. So Raymond Brown basically admits that Jude uses non-canonical Old Testament literature. So these Jewish apocryphal sources could contain some accurate information, and the Quran is confirming these stories, according to the Quran chapter 5 verse 48. So basically, there could be some true stories found in these Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources, and the Quran is confirming their veracity. So these could be true stories, and these could be true stories that weren't recorded in the Old Testament and New Testament, but somehow they found their way into the Old Testament apocryphal and the New Testament apocryphal, and the Quran is confirming their authenticity. See the Quran chapter 5, since that's one of the modes of the Quran. See the Quran chapter 5 verse 48. So basically, I have this Bible with me. I have this Bible, right? The Archaeological Study Bible. And like I said in previous videos, basically, the New Testament itself quotes apocryphal material. Let me just get to notice what this Bible says, and this is the Archaeological Study Bible, page 2041. It says, I'll just get to the relevant part. It is possible that through God's providence, some pseudegraphica or apocrypha have preserved some genuine traditions, and Jude was able to discern the true from the false. So basically, these Christian editors or these Christian scholars are basically admitting that, it's possible that the apocryphal or pseudegraphica have some true stories within them, and that Jude is writing the true stories found in these Jewish apocryphal or pseudegraphica works. So why can't the same be said about the Quran? Why can't the Quran do the same thing, where the Quran is confirming the true stories found in these Jewish apocryphal sources? So not everything in the Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources can be dismissed as fiction and fairy tales are false. There could be some true stories in there, and the Quran is confirming their authenticity. We read in the Gospel of John, chapter 21, we read in the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 25, states that Jesus did many other things and miracles that weren't written down. So it's possible that Jesus did speak as a baby. He did make clay birds, etc. And these were oral stories, and they didn't find their way into the canonical New Testament. And the various stories about the Virgin Mary, which are also found in apocryphal sources, etc. That these stories about Jesus and the Virgin Mary didn't find their way into the canonical New Testament, but they found their way into the apocryphal sources. And the Quran is basically confirming that these were true stories. So again, read the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 25, where it says Jesus did many other things and many other miracles that weren't written down in the canonical books. So it's possible that the Quran is confirming that. It's possible that Jesus did make a clay bird. He did speak in infancy. He did speak when he was a baby. And the Quran and the New Testament authors didn't write it down for whatever reason, but the Quran is confirming that these were true stories. These were true stories about Jesus that somehow didn't make their way into the New Testament. Same thing with the Jewish sources too. There could be some true stories in there which didn't find their way into the Old Testament, and the Quran is confirming their authenticity. There's a really good website called Islamic-awareness.org where these people have shown that these so-called Jewish sources of the Quran, which is the Jewish Midrash and the Talmud and the Jewish commentaries, etc., that the critics say that Prophet Muhammad copied off of to author, the Quran. These Talmudic and rabbinic sources actually post-date Islam. They come after the Prophet Muhammad died. Thus, it's impossible for the Prophet Muhammad to copy off these sources when these sources actually post-date Islam, or they came after the Prophet Muhammad died. So the next time someone uses the argument that Prophet Muhammad made up the Quran for some self-serving motive, or the Prophet Muhammad plagiarized off the Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources or the Bible, even though there was no Bible in Arabic during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. The earliest Arabic translation of the Old Testament and New Testament comes from the 9th century. In other words, 300 years after the Prophet Muhammad died. But anyways, next time they use those type of arguments that Prophet Muhammad plagiarized and Prophet Muhammad made up the Quran for self-serving purposes, these are fallacious arguments. The argument that Prophet Muhammad made up the Quran for self-serving purposes is called the fallacy of circumstantial ad hominem. The argument that Prophet Muhammad plagiarized Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources or false stories found in these Jewish and Christian apocryphal sources is called the genetic fallacy. So these are fallacious arguments. Hopefully this clears up two of the major arguments used against the Quran and against the prophethood of Muhammad. Stay tuned. The final videos are coming up.